Welcome to the Soberish Uprising. My name is Holly Crevo, a former heavy drinker who started a Soberish Uprising of her own over 2 years ago, and everything in her life has changed. On the Soberish Uprising, we tell stories of finding freedom from alcohol on our own terms, making it our best power move. And so today I am joined by my online friend, Starlyn. Good afternoon.
Hi, Holly. How are you?
Good, doing well. Thank you for joining me today.
Yes.
So we connected through a mutual friend, and we connected before this podcast and there are always such insightful conversations. And a topic which we'll get into that kept on coming up is like, why as women we give alcohol a pass when it comes to thinking about all the ways we want to make ourselves healthy. We just do all the things, but we also continue drinking. So I think you're the perfect person for this conversation.
I'm excited.
Well, good. Well, tell us a little maybe about, you've been sober 4 years now. What was that moment before that last drink where you just like no more, and maybe kind of what led up to that?
Yeah. So I didn't know it was going to be my last drink, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
That was one of the interesting things about it, actually. But leading up to it, I was struggling deeply with anxiety. I didn't realize it was anxiety and depression. Now in hindsight, I'm like, oh, that's what it was. But I was ashamed of it, I think. And I didn't want to go to a doctor and get some sort of diagnosis because I love to fix things myself. I also consider myself quite healthy. And so saying that I had this thing felt really shameful to me. So I never really went and dealt with it. So I used alcohol as my coping tool. And it wasn't working any longer.
Yeah.
It was I felt worse and worse. And I was like, man, I really got to do something about this. And so I went to the doctor, and they, of course, put me on Lexapro, and were like, here, try this. And the problem with that is if you combine anxiety medication and drinking, you then tend to black out after just a very small amount of drinking. And well, that's not great for anxiety either. So I had to kind of make a choice of, okay, I can quit drinking, which scared me because I had been my, medicine of sorts for so long. And then it was like, well, I could, quit drinking and be on anxiety medication, or I can continue this blackout path, which is obviously not working. So I really had to like make some choices. And I stumbled across a book. I'm sure you've heard of it, by Annie Grace, This Naked Mind. And I devoured that book. And it just spoke to me so deeply about how we've been poisoning ourselves and we've just been conditioned this way. And I was like, that's interesting. Like, here I thought I was having a good time. And I slowly started to incorporate some different lifestyle tools in meditation and gratitude journaling. And then one day I just didn't have a drink. And then that drink, it just continued. And after a month, my husband's like, are you ever going to drink again? And I said, I don't know. But I've never put that like, this is my last drink on it, because that always was like a hard stop, which made me feel like I had to rebel. I don't like that rule.
I love it. There is a theme in this podcast of women like you. Yeah. That's fascinating. I don't think I remember that in our conversation, is that it wasn't, I'm going to try for 6 weeks. I'm not going to drink for a couple, whatever. You didn't drink, and you just kept on not drinking. And 1,200, whatever, 1,300 days later, there's been no drinks.
Yeah. It was almost like that thing, like before that I had done that, like, I'm not going to have a drink for 2 weeks. And it was like to prove that I had control over the situation, because I didn't want alcohol to have control over me. So I had to do that to prove that I was still in control. Yeah. But then I would spend 2 weeks obsessing about when I would get to have that drink. And then it was like 2 weeks would hit and I'd be like, okay, I did it. I can have a drink now. Yeah. And that was like, looking back, I'm like so insanely crazy and unhealthy. But at the time, it was the only form of control I had.
Yeah.
And by not ever putting this is my last drink, I wasn't making any sort of rule that I couldn't break, because I really hate rules and I hate being told what to do. even if it's
Mm.
by myself. It doesn't matter who tells me like what or what not to do. If somebody tells me like I have to do something, I'm like, watch this.
Yeah. Yeah. Even yourself. That's interesting,
Even
right? Like,
yeah,
it's like even yeah. You're like, "Nobody tells me what to do,
yeah,
including me."
exactly.
Well, and that's interesting too that you said that about, and I feel the same way kind of, and you do coaching and health coaching, and I feel this kind of the same way about like finding your purpose. I'm like, if finding your purpose is making you so miserable, like maybe it's like we should do it differently, right? And so if like all your like if you're obsessing about your purpose and you're miserable, or if you're obsessing about alcohol and you're not drinking, like that defeats the purpose. You're still trapped by alcohol, right?
Mhm.
Like you may not be like consuming it, but if all you're doing is thinking about it, it's still just like taking up all this space.
Exactly. Yeah, it
Yeah.
totally has control over you. If you can't stop
Yeah.
thinking about it, then it's in control and you are not. And
Yeah.
I love that it like never even crosses my mind now. Occasionally
Mhm.
I'll be like, man, I would love to go and sit in that sunny patio and have a drink, but I'm like, oh, the anxiety that would come after that.
Mm.
And I weigh it and I'm like, not worth it. Not even
Yeah.
a little
But
bit.
you could if you wanted to, right?
I
You
could
created
if
this
I wanted
space
to.
that if you were really intentional and you that was worth it to you, or you wanted to play around with it, like
Mhm.
you could.
I could because I there's no rules. Like
Mm.
I'm an adult. Like I am a grown ass woman. I can make
Yeah.
my own choices.
Yeah.
But I also choose that I'm like, I love how my life feels now. I love waking
Mm.
up without like shame and regret. Like that shame and
Mhm.
regret was awful.
Mm.
It was terrible to wake up
Yeah.
every day wondering why I had to be like this, you know?
Mm. And
And
what
now
when you say be like this, what does that mean?
it was like, I couldn't just have a drink,
Mm.
it was
Mhm.
always like I wanted to have more. And
Yeah.
then I would like wake up in the middle of the night and then I would have anxiety about it. And then it was like I would work out to show that I could still be a healthy person
Mm.
and but I would feel like crap the whole time. It was just like I
Yeah.
wasn't in control and I wanted to feel like a person that was in control of their life.
Right. Yeah. That's interesting. You talked about, I'm curious whenever you went to the doctor for this anxiety and they put you on Lexapro, like, was there any conversation with you at that point about what you were drinking?
They did say, well, maybe you should like slow down on your drinking. And I'll be really honest. I'll be the first one to say, was I ever honest with the doctor about how much I was drinking? No. I'm continually baffled by that question because I'm like, anyone that's truly struggling is going to be like, well, I put away a 6 to 12 pack a night. No one's
Yeah.
saying that.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
you're always dialing it back. And maybe
Right.
they have some sort of like, I don't know, thing at the doctor's office. Or like, well, they say this, but they probably mean
Two
this.
means four.
Yeah. So I'm not sure, but there was like well, maybe you should look at other ways to,
Mm.
but there was also, there was no guidance on how to make that work. Like, what does that
Mm.
look like? Right. They don't offer like someone to help you coach through that. It's like, it
Right.
feels like go to AA is your choice.
Yeah.
And that is not my thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I had to figure it out on my own, but they told me I should probably look into some other form. And I'm like, well, if I could live without anxiety, I'd be already doing it.
Yeah. Right. 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 If I knew how to do that. What
Yeah.
I love, you talked about like not wanting to, the anxiety felt shaming, right? And then so you used booze to like somewhat, qu air quotes, cope with that, right? But then, like, also the shame of drinking, so, like, you were just in, like, this, like,
A
hamster
spiral.
wheel of shame,
Yes.
right? Like, you
Yes.
did it to mask, but then you felt shame about it. So when did that do you remember the moment that shame started to go away?
Um, I would say the shame, I think probably I can't pinpoint an exact moment, but I love that question. But I'm thinking it was like while reading that book and realizing that I had been
Mm,
duped by society
yeah.
almost. Like, wait, that first time that I like drank and it was terrible, but then I thought all the cool kids are doing it, 'cause
Mhm.
it was high school.
Yeah.
So it's like, like as soon as I realized that I wasn't the only one, there
Mm,
was that. But then once I started like incorporating those like, different like lifestyle components into my life and waking up feeling good and not
mhm.
because I was on a 2-week break, but like
Yeah.
feeling good because I'd made this choice on my own and I was in control. It was
Yeah.
like, I never feel shame anymore. And I
Mm,
feel like I've lived, like I was swimming in shame
mhm,
and guilt
mhm.
before. And now guilt isn't nearly as present in my life. And
Oh,
for a
man.
mom, that's like a lot because moms feel a lot of
Yeah,
guilt. Like it's a part of
yeah,
our like identity almost to this point. And now that has totally gone down, which is important.
yeah. Oh my goodness. That's huge, right? And you talk about that shame, and is that just like the shame of drinking too much, or was that causing you to do other things that were unaligned with who you wanted to be, or like was it just all of that?
You know, I think mostly it was that like I wasn't in control and I'm a person, I'm an
Mm,
alpha. I like to be in charge. I like to be in control. Like I will own that. Um, but that it was like that idea that like, my kids would be driving me crazy. And in order to handle the
mm,
chaos, it was like, well, they're driving me crazy, so I'll have a drink. And that, it wasn't like early in the day. However, I got lucky. I quit drinking just like 4 months before COVID. If I had
mm,
not, then I could almost guarantee that I would have been one of those moms at 10 o'clock, like, hey, let's
yeah,
have a margarita to survive. Like, I
right.
feel so
Mm,
lucky that I was able to make these changes before COVID. But I did feel a lot of shame about my inability to parent in the way that I wanted to
yeah.
and to be the role model I wanted to be for my
Mm,
daughters. And now
yeah.
I feel really great about the role model that I get to
Yeah.
be.
Oh, thank you for sharing that. I know
Yeah.
that can feel a little personal, but I think it's important to say, sometimes that the shame that we feel and guilt when we're drinking isn't like going out and getting a DUI or fighting with our spouse. Like it's not this extreme. It can just be that like every time I'm like short with my kids, or I have to have a drink to parent, or I'm not showing up for my workout in the morning. It's like those little like shame gremlins that just like it doesn't have to be a big, huge thing to carry that shame.
Yeah. And
And
I like what
parenting
you
is
said.
it is important. I'm not trying to down, but it's like those little moments, right? That
Yeah.
you're like and to have no guilt as a or probably not no guilt as a mom, but less guilt.
Less guilt, yes. Like,
Huge.
now it's like my guilt I feel like I can own, just like when you just said, like, not
Mm,
showing up for a workout. Now when I don't show up for a workout, it's an active choice that I make because I'm present, where
yeah.
I will wake up and I'll be like, "I feel really tired today," or,
Mhm.
"I don't feel like I have the energy for that. I'm going to
Yeah,
choose to do this," rather
yeah.
than before it'd be like, "I just can't." And
Yes, it's
that
that.
it had a weight to it that
Mhm.
now it's like I get to choose and I can be like, "You know what? I'm choosing not to work out today, and it's not because I'm hungover."
Yeah. Oh my god. Thank you for that feels so different, right? Like, you wake
Oh,
up and you're like, "I'm really tired. I'm sore. I think I'll go for a 20-minute walk later," or, "I
yeah,
won't do anything." But it's not I woke up and I'm nauseous and I tell myself I'm tired, but I really know I'm drunk or hungover
yeah,
or
yeah,
still drunk. I don't know. It could be that
yeah.
too.
It's being able to own it and be
Yeah.
like, honoring your body, and,
Yeah.
like, now I can honor my body, whereas before, I might get up and push a workout just to prove that I could, which was
Yeah.
not honoring my body at all.
Right. Right. Oh, I love it. That guilt and shame is interesting because you talk about like you don't have it as much as a mom because now you're making active, conscious choices, kind of like making the best choice at the moment with the data you have, right? Like how
Mhm.
that shifts for you. How has that changed your relationship with your kids?
Um, I feel it's been monumental.
Mm,
I mean, they were, when I stopped drinking, they were, let's see, like 5 and 7 in that age
mhm.
range. Um, and so they'll have memories maybe, but also I
Mhm.
don't know because it wasn't like there was no DUIs, there was no domestic violence, there was no chaos. So I don't know
Yeah.
um, how it impacted them in that way, but I'm sure that they will have like I'm sure that the way that I have patience for
Mm,
them now as I might not have then. Like I still struggle with patience at times
yeah.
because I'm human, but I am so much quicker to apologize, to be
Mm,
aware of my situation, and I am much slower to react. And I don't yell like I used to. I
mm,
used to yell so much, and now I don't like now, like it takes a lot to get me to yell. It's like, okay, now you guys are just not listening and you're like
yeah.
making like, but before it was like I would just pop off, like
Mm,
just explode.
Yeah.
And I hated it. I hated it, but I didn't know any other way to react. And now
Right.
it's like this whole new calm, which is like taken over. And I'm like, oh, this is nice that I don't yell. Because when I do yell, I'm like, oh, I hate it when I do that.
Oh, yes. Yes. Well, and it's like it's I've said in a podcast I was on, it was like talking about like you're doing like something your future self is going to thank you for, right? Like when you don't drink, right? Like the future mom you is like, I don't want to yell at my kids, so I'm not going to do something that's going to set me up to yell at my kids or yell at my spouse or show up late or whatever that is. And that's such a beautiful share of like, now if you do lose your patience, that's just who you are because you're human. It's not because you drink too much, which
Yeah,
feels shitty to
it does
be
feel
like,
shitty.
I just gave my power to this wine instead of just me just showing up as the asshole, which we all do sometimes, right?
Right, exactly. Like now it's just like human like nature.
Right.
And I don't like my husband and I feel like there was so
Mhm.
many more situations where I would like be mad or frustrated or
Mm.
whatever. It's almost like texting with somebody where you can't read like the in between, like, you know what I
Mhm.
mean? It was
Yeah.
like that felt like what our conversations were like because my like things were blurred in like how I was reacting. And the next day I'd have to like replay it, but it was through like a foggy lens.
Yeah.
And so the communication just wasn't there. So like
Mhm.
that's improved,
Yeah.
obviously. And then now they get to see me in the mornings taking care of myself. They walk in and I'm meditating and they'll sit down with me and just sit, or they'll see me working out and they'll jump in and join me. Like, so
Mhm.
now they get to see this like better side where it's like role modeling for them how to take care of themselves.
Yeah.
And I tell them why I'm doing it. I tell them that I'm working out
Mhm.
because it helps me be a better mom, because it helps like my mental health. That's why I work out now. Before it was like to prove a point, and now it's like, oh, my brain
Mhm.
needs this. I need this like release. And
Yeah.
so I talk about it and I tell them why I need it, and they get it. Like they don't see me doing it from a negative standpoint of like,
Mhm.
punishing myself.
Yeah.
They'd never see me punishing myself, which is what I was
Mhm.
doing before, essentially.
Yeah. Oh, I love that's such great thing to like tell them why too, right? They see you meditating and working out, but they don't like if they're 5 and 7, they're like, oh, but it's like to
Yeah.
explain that, to have that like reference.
Yeah. And I mean, now they're almost 10 and 12. And so it's
Oh
like
yeah.
they're, you know, they are coming to a place where like my youngest struggles with anxiety. So
Mm.
we do tapping together, we meditate together, we
Oh,
breathe together, and it's just a natural part of things. Whereas before, I would not have had that presence, awareness, desire, like anything to do that. And
mhm.
so now she gets all these great tools to
That's
go into
amazing.
life with, which
Yeah.
is something that I wish I would have had.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Oh, what a gift. Yes, they've aged since COVID. They didn't stay the same age. Well, and I wanna get into kind of the health aspect, but, like, I'm curious, when you talk about, like, now looking back, hindsight, I always say if we would have known different to do different, we would have done it earlier, right? But, like, looking back, anxiety and drinking, like, you really did believe that your drinking was helping your anxiety. Now that you're 4 years out, like, if somebody was listening and that's their story they're telling themselves, what's something you would share with them?
Oh, that's a great question, Holly. Yeah, honestly, I mean, it was my tool. Whether or not I thought it was actually helping, I don't know, but it was the only way I knew to like calm the
Mm,
feelings because I was
mm,
afraid of feeling. And so I guess what I would tell somebody is like, if you are feeling anxious and struggling with it, rather than trying to make it go away and numb it out, take a pause and just like respect that your mind and body are probably trying to tell you something. So if
mhm.
you'll just slow down and listen to what it's trying to tell you, it's really good guidance about how you should actually be living your life,
Yeah.
which
Mm,
I was always like, make it go away, make it be quiet.
mm,
I don't want to feel any of that. I hated feelings. It was so
mm.
uncomfortable. And now I feel all the feelings. And guess what? It's really uncomfortable.
Still
But
uncomfortable.
it's still uncomfortable. But it's uncomfortable without the guilt and the shame and the anxiety and all those other
Yeah,
things. Like now it's
right.
like, oh, I can feel that way. I'm still safe. I'm teaching my children how to feel things and to
Mhm.
acknowledge those feelings so they don't have to try and like run away from them
Yeah.
later. So I would just say, like, anxiety for me, I made friends with it and
Mm,
started using it as a tool to be like, why am I feeling anxious? What is out of alignment?
Yeah.
And then following that and making changes, whether it was boundaries, rearranging schedules, whatever it took.
Mhm.
Did it take time? Yes. This was not overnight,
Right, right, right.
but it became my friend to where it's like I can use that as my guidance for where I want to
Mhm.
go.
Mhm. Yeah. No, thank you. Yeah, kind of sitting with that. That's something I've noticed, like, when I really, like, do wanna drink, I'm like, "What's going on here?" Like,
Mm,
looking at, like, how I'm feeling in my body, what's my stress, have I been sleeping, like, what am
yeah.
I feeling? I'm like, "Oh, yeah, that
Mhm.
makes sense why I'm, like, angsty for this moment," but same
Yeah.
thing if you're totally sober, or if you're drinking, like, just sitting in and be like, "What is that? Like, what's really going on? What am I feeling?" And then, like you said, this isn't overnight. Like, I'm sure you're still uncovering 4 years later ways
Oh.
new ways stuff comes up, like, this isn't like I had a coach I work with, she's like, "You're never healed, you're always healing," right? You're
Yeah.
always, like, figuring it out.
It's an ongoing process for sure, and
Yeah.
it's still a joke, like, because 'cause I'll go hiking as, like, an escapism for me, like, I'm like, "I
Mhm.
need to go for a hike," and then where I live, it's really busy, and a lot of times you'll get
Mhm.
to the trailhead, and there'll be no place to park,
Yeah.
and then I feel this, like, big letdown because I was like, "I needed this." So now it's the joke, like, I'll tell my husband, "I'm gonna go hiking, and if there's no place to park, then you can just find me at the bar and I'll be drinking some,
Yeah.
like Bloody Marys." And he's like, okay. But it's like, just like my sick humor of like, okay,
Yeah.
I really need to escape from this. I'm feeling very like
Yeah.
anxious. And if I can't hike, I guess I'll just have to drink. But, it's 4 years of, not drinking and I still go to the booze as the comedy
Isn't that
source.
funny? Yeah. It's yeah. It always lands well.
It
Um,
does.
and I know that you do, like, health and fitness coaching for women, and, I love we talked about this about how kind of the women you work with or how like we leave out like alcohol, right? We're willing to do all these things and maybe not even health related, like aging, right? Like Botox, spend a ton of money on products. Like those are two different, but still I think kind of go to this perception
Mhm.
of women and where their energy is. Like, so are you seeing that more with women you're working with, like not acknowledging the drinking, starting to including it in their health goals?
Most people want to dance around it. Like,
Mm,
what can we do besides that
yeah.
thing?
I mean,
Like, it's
I've done
like,
it. I've
yeah,
done that.
yeah. Like,
Like, I was
can
like, "I'll
we
eat 6 things of asparagus and 4 ounces of chicken, but I'm not gonna give up my wine."
yeah, everyone wants to, like, have, like, okay, but can I still drink? But it's like,
Mm,
at that point, I wanna ask them, like, why is it that, like, you are so attached to that? Like, what is
mhm.
it that is missing? And then we can start to look at, like, is it, like, a coping tool for you for overwhelm and anxiety? And what can we go ahead and change within your life to
Yeah.
make it not be such a thing? And I don't ever like people have actually asked me, do I have to quit drinking if I work with you? And I'm like,
Mm,
no. Like just because I had a problem that like, I decided I had to go alcohol free completely for,
yeah.
I don't believe that that's the case for everyone. Everyone's relationship is different. Some people can
Mhm.
easily have a glass of wine, every couple months and be totally happy, or a glass of wine a week. That
Mhm.
wasn't me.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I knew that I couldn't do that, so I just want people to find why it is they need that drink and why they
Mm,
can't give it up and assess from there, and then we can, like, work and find ways that, like, "Oh, maybe you don't need that if you're taking that time for yourself and you're pouring into yourself where
mhm.
you feel like you're supported and you're not just like, 'I just need this to get through,'"
Yeah, yeah,
Like
yeah. For
yeah.
sure, that makes total sense. Because when you were, were actively drinking, health and wellness was still important to you
Oh,
too
yeah.
at that time? Like,
Mhm.
it's always been
Oh, yeah.
how did you reconcile that?
Because well, I'm still gonna get up and work out in the morning, so it's
Yeah,
fine.
totally.
If I can get up and work out, it's fine, and I'm gonna eat all these vegetables, like, I
Mhm.
love vegetables. Vegetables have, like, always been
Mhm.
a big favorite of mine. So,
Mm.
I can eat all these healthy things. I'll make my own sourdough. I, like, ferment my own foods. I like all these things, but I didn't place a high enough value on, like, what kind of quality of sleep was I getting? Because guess what? If I would've gotten better sleep,
Mm. Yeah.
my anxiety probably would have gone down, but I couldn't get good sleep because I would stay up too late, kind of doing like that. What do they call it? Like revenge relaxing. Have you heard of that? Where it's like you stay up
Oh,
late to like,
yes.
scrolling on your
Especially
phone because you didn't get
moms.
to do the things.
Yeah.
So, so it's like almost like that. Like I would stay up and just keep drinking and be like,
Mhm.
okay. And then I would go to sleep and get terrible sleep. And then I would wake up usually around 3 or 4 in the morning, heart racing,
Oh my God.
and then be wide awake for a couple hours, sleep for a little bit longer, and then wake up and be like, okay, it's time to work out. But I was getting terrible sleep.
Yeah. Right. But in your mind, like you said, you're eating the vegetables, you're working out,
Yep.
you're drinking your water, all
Yep.
these things. But then this alcohol was this piece. Well, like you said too, if you don't want to be, and again, I think you are so similar to a lot of the women I work with and that I have been on this podcast. Like, you don't want to be told what to do. You want to do it your own way. You do have your shit together. It's in control, but underneath it's just like really hard.
Yeah. And I think my idea of like when people talk about like wellness, immediately like food and exercise. And that was my idea of what it meant. And now I know it's so much deeper than that.
Yeah.
Like on my own personal journey, I'm like, oh, I do need to focus on like my mindset and how I'm talking to myself. I do need to focus on my sleep. I need to focus on setting boundaries, like all these things that were things that I didn't think were important. Like before I started my journey, meditation, I was like, hard pass. I do not slow down. I'm a go fast kind of girl.
Right.
Sitting down and just like sitting there sounds so stupid. And I refused to even try it because I was like, that's dumb. I don't need to do that. And now I basically can't live without it.
Yeah. Well, it opens your, I mean, you're not able, like we talked about, like your intuition, right? Like your intuition is there, but you can't, it's hard to really trust your intuition when it's like muddled with alcohol.
Exactly. Yeah. I didn't trust myself. And that's a big part of my coaching now is like tuning in and trusting.
Yeah.
Because if you can trust yourself and believe that it's like you're okay to take a break from exercise if you need to, what you're going to fuel your body with, like it's okay to make these choices, but listening to what you want and trusting yourself, you cannot tap into that if you are drinking heavily. It's just not. They can't coincide at all.
Yeah. No. And we think the problem is that we think we do, right? We think we are. And especially even, I think the definition for a heavy drinker is like, for a woman is like 8 drinks a week. You're like, that's not much, a couple glasses of wine every night, right? Or like there's a lot of heavy drinkers. And it's, you talk about, it makes sense we used it to cope, and it makes sense people would put in their wellness journey, right? Because like one glass of wine is good for your heart. So like all of these reasons, especially as women that we bought into, it's like, it makes sense. Like nobody, not at fault. It makes sense. There's an article that's like women are drinking more than they ever have. I'm like, well, good job. Your $1 billion industry worked. Like it worked. You told us we did. There's thousands of t-shirts you can buy. It's in like quote medical journals. So it's like, it makes sense that people come in and they're like, I work out, I eat well, and I drink 1 glass of wine a night, wink, and you're like, so I'm healthy.
Yeah. Because the drinking, like, well, it's helping me relax. And it's like, I don't know that's, the healthy way to go. But like, you can't start with that either. Like, I never start with that with someone because it's like, you can't knock someone's like, what's holding them up, like propping them up right out of the way. But we need to find other things because I have worked with people. I've even had people that I haven't worked with that have just like kind of followed along, like just from like content that I've posted on social media. And they will come up to me and be like, I haven't had a drink all month. And I'm like, really? But it's like, they slowly started to listen. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. That like just sharing your journey and showing other people that it's possible to live without that, like that they're like, oh, I can do that too. Like, because we've been so ingrained with mommy wine culture and like, we gotta try and survive the little ones. And, I get it. I was terrified when I quit drinking. I'm like, but what will I do with my life? Everyone drinks. What will I do?
Isn't that
I'm
crazy?
living, it turns out.
What have you done? What have you done with your life?
I mean, well, I've started my coaching business. That's been something like
huge.
major. But I feel like it's been in the smaller things that have like really, like made a difference, and seeing that, oh, I can go and do the exact same things. Like, the best thing in the world, going to concerts that you pay money for and then remembering them the next day. That is like one of my favorites. Like, I'm like, wow, how many concerts have I gone to? And the next day I'm like, I don't remember that. And now
was
I'm like,
good? I hope it was good.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's like I get to really be present and enjoy these things that before it was like, you'd pregame for or whatever. And
Mhm.
the money savings, holy
Yeah.
smokes, it's like
Yeah.
now I can go out and it's like the bill is half the
I
price.
know. Like, how in the world? That is so much
Yeah.
money out the door.
And I
Yeah.
could justify it before, where like I'd be like, oh, well, you have to include that amount for alcohol. Whereas now it's like
Mhm.
I'll look at the price for, a meal I want and I'm like choking, but then I'm like, wait, I would have spent that no problem
Yeah.
on a night out years
Yeah.
ago. Like
Right. Yeah, yeah.
totally
There's
justified.
and I love that you said that. Like, what will I do with my life? You're like, everything I've been doing, but times 10 and
Yeah,
more, right? Like, it's
but
like, because
better.
I remember being like, well, what do you like? You just go to like a wedding, you don't drink, and you're like, yeah, that's what you do. Like all these things, there's like nothing you can't do that you were sober that you don't do when you were drinking, except just not drink, right? Like everything else, you just don't drink. And it's,
Yeah,
but if you've been drinking your whole life, you're like, I don't understand what you mean.
yeah. And now I don't have to worry about how I'm going to get home or be like, oh, I'm going to have to leave the car, figure out an
Yeah.
Uber thing. And honestly, when I quit, like Uber was barely a thing. I feel like when I
Mhm.
like it wasn't something that was like really heavily used. So like I
Right.
remember getting an Uber when I was still drinking, and it was shortly after that that I quit. But it's like now I'm like, oh, park the car, go do the things, and then I get
Yeah.
to get back in my car and drive home, and it's not a whole figuring out of the
Right.
logistics.
Like,
It's
who's
great.
gonna drive? What's that gonna
Yeah.
look like?
Yeah.
Ah, that's incredible. Well, we could talk forever, and maybe we'll have to do another catch up when you're 5 years in. But kind of two questions as we kind of round us out. What would if there's somebody that is feeling a lot of anxiety, especially as moms, you guys have so much mom guilt and pressure, like, and is using alcohol to cope, or maybe using alcohol to cope. What's maybe one word of advice or a tip you would share with them to kind of start looking at that?
I would say to start slowing down. And if you haven't started like meditating or journaling, to try that. It takes like moments. It doesn't have to be a 20-minute sit. It can be a 3-minute sit. But I feel like because drinking helps you escape everything, being learning to meditate and just to sit with
Mm,
my feelings and know that it was okay and I was safe allowed me to stop trying to run, like numb out those feelings.
mhm.
It was, oh, I can sit here and it's okay. It was uncomfortable, but I learned to do it.
Yeah.
But it was literally like 3 to 5 minute guided meditations. And
Mhm.
it was like just sitting there. And sometimes I would squirm. Sometimes I still squirm. Like sometimes it's hard, but it's just learn to sit with those uncomfortable feelings
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
and know you're safe. And it's okay to feel like that. And feeling is human.
Mm.
You don't
Thank
have
you.
to try and escape all of it.
Yeah, I love that. Well, like you said earlier, like it's going to be uncomfortable either way, but what's the long-term payoff of the discomfort, right? One pays off, one doesn't. So it's like we're going to have to deal with it eventually,
Yeah, and
whatever
my
that
my
is.
biggest fear was that my children were
Mm,
not gonna learn how to be uncomfortable,
mhm.
and that they would then go forward and try and escape it, and that they would go down the same path I did, and I'm like, I
Mhm.
don't want my girls to think that motherhood is martyrdom. I don't want them to think that they have to suffer in order to be a parent, or do you have to
Mhm.
escape it. Like, I want
Mhm.
them to be able to, like, know how to sit with feelings and be like, "Oh, it's okay." Like,
Yeah, yeah. Mm. You need to put that on a t-shirt. Mother is not martyrdom. Put that on a coffee cup. Not a
right?
wine glass, a coffee cup.
A coffee cup.
My last question, Starlyn, and I will put how to get a hold of you in the show notes and all that. What does soberish mean to you?
Oh, well, you know, since I'm fully alcohol free, it's hard for
Mhm.
me to like answer that fully,
Yeah.
but like I feel like I do a lot of ishing in my life because
Mhm.
I don't like to put rules and restrictions on things. So everything is kind of an ish to me. It's kind of like it's doing things my way
Yeah, yeah.
without those rules. Like I'm going to say that this is how I am for the most part, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
nothing solid. I don't wanna say like, I have a hard time when I say I'm sober, I feel like I'm in AA and I feel like I'm in this recovery path, and I can't say that I am in recovery. I'm just on a journey.
Yeah.
And like for me, it's like maybe I am soberish because I'm not putting a restriction on the fact that I will never drink again.
Right. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I love that idea of like you're doing, and that's what it's about, right? Like doing what it is for you, and you are sober. And I love this other idea, it's adding ish and giving that freedom and flexibility. Um, Always honoring the woman you want to be, though.
Yeah.
Awesome.
100%.
Starlyn, thank you so much for joining me. Thank you everybody for tuning in for this amazing conversation. Please give us a review, a follow, a like, share with a friend. And remember, everything you want is on the other side of saying no to that drink.